Welcome to Richard and Greg, a channel dedicated to discussion, debate and argument on a whole array of topics. Today we talk to Greg about the current coronavirus figures, especially as we've reached more than 5 million cases worldwide, of which the United States has over 1.5 million cases and over 90,000 deaths. We discuss the lockdown easing, plus a new mutation of the virus allegedly discovered in China. So let's go over to our discussion with Greg. Welcome to Richard and Greg. The date is Wednesday, the 20th of May, 2020. And we're providing a coronavirus update. And interestingly, worldwide, we have now exceeded 5 million cases and 325,000 deaths. The United States is still by far the worst affected, with more than 90,000 deaths and 1.5 million cases. With Europe, the United States, and the United Kingdom now adopting more relaxed lockdown procedures, the question is, are these figures going to get out of hand? And can we expect to see a second wave? So let's get the opinion from Greg. Greg, good morning.
Good morning, Richard. And all. We are over 5 million as stated, and 325,000 total deaths, with America contributing 1.5 million to the 5 million and 93,500 to the 325. Fairly alarming, but there is still a possibility of total deaths in Britain rising steadily and inexorably to between 1.5 and 2 million, and in America to up to 10 million. However, I'm pleased to say this is looking less and less likely. Our government, particularly in Britain, has taken the medical scientific advice from the very beginning and adhered to it fairly religiously, including, for instance, not announcing it to be a pandemic and locking down until the World Health Organization announced it as a pandemic. We assumed that it was just another virus akin to SARS and MERS. There was no reason to believe otherwise at that stage. As soon as it was declared a pandemic and more serious by the WHO, Britain implemented a serious lockdown, which has now continued for between 8 and 9 weeks, and beginning to prove a problem for many people, both because they just aren't seeing the death rates that had been cautioned by the scientific and medical authorities, and in real terms, 5 million cases, and we know the figures are wildly wrong, and 325,000 deaths worldwide. Well, if it was 5 times that, it would not be a really serious concern. That sounds callous. However, there are 8 billion people on this planet. We have large numbers of people who die every day on a regular basis, and although we have had a particularly high level of mortality in our care homes in Britain because of following medical advice and that of the scientists who said that the hospital stood a chance of being overrun, therefore hospitals were the worst place to be for the elderly, and we needed the space in the hospital to deal with COVID-19, and we needed that space available in a way that we could isolate the people with the disease from those with the other many problems, illnesses, and diseases that the National Health Service caters for. As a result, beds that were occupied on a geriatric basis were vacated, and people who did not show symptoms of COVID-19 nor seemed to have it were sent home, where they were cared for in the community, or to elder care of various forms. Now, do bear in mind that care homes are, in the main, frail care. Therefore, the elderly, the infirm, and those in their last few years. Not very many people live on in care homes for over 3 years, and many can realistically be expected to die within 1, 2, or 3 years. As a result of moving these people back to their care homes on medical advice, it has now, in retrospect, been discovered that many of them were asymptomatic, mainly because one assumes because their systems were frail and even their COVID-19 symptoms were frail and didn't show through. As a result, we are learning in the last day or two that during the period of lockdown, care homes in Britain have experienced a 1 in 10 mortality rate. That is slightly higher than double the expected mortality rate for the period. And minded that there are some 4,070 beds in, I'll get this right in a minute, approaching half a million, 470,000 beds in care homes in Britain. That means that during this period of around about 9 weeks, some 45,000 people have died in care homes. It's estimated this is slightly higher than a 50% increase on what could reasonably have been expected for the same period, measured against previous years at the same time of year. That means that somewhere in the region of 25,000 people have died in care homes. Some 10,000 have died in the community, and I think it's 16,000 have died in hospital. Either that or the total is 16,000 for home in the community at home as opposed to in care homes and in hospitals. Either way, it's an awful lot more than the 35,000 which is being quoted. But let's put this into perspective. We had previous outbreaks of virus that threatened to be pandemics. We can all remember SARS, MERS, H1N1, AIDS, HIV, Ebola, and the like. these have not transpired to be pandemics. Yes, they have been a problem. And do bear in mind, we haven't got any kind of vaccination against any of those viruses. So counting on a vaccination being available by Christmas, as some hacks and politicians seem to be claiming is possible, even probable, is, in my opinion, total nonsense. For a virus to be dealt with, we have to establish exactly how it works so that we can stop it, and we can stop it safely. We haven't managed that successfully with the common cold even, or flu. So what makes them think that we will achieve it for this more complex virus? I just don't believe it.
Well, Greg,
It may come in time. However, even if we had a virus, a vaccine against the virus by Christmas, if you take Britain, it would take how long to produce 67 million doses and administer them? And it has been agreed on the world platform that all countries will cooperate and ensure that a vaccination is readily available on a free and fair basis worldwide for those who need it, regardless of their ability to pay for it. So we are talking of producing 8 billion doses, distributing them worldwide, training a force of people capable to administer the virus, the vaccine, and distributing and ensuring that the vaccine has got into all the corners of world society. That isn't going to happen for 5 years at the very best. So I'm afraid, folks, we're going to have to learn to live with this virus. We can do this by common sense, maintaining social distance wherever possible, by making sure that if we or any of our family show any signs of being unwell that could be attributed to COVID-19, we isolate ourselves, be tolerant of people who are isolating themselves. Yes, there will obviously be the odd person who will use this as an excuse for skiving. And that can happen. But the society must expose these people for their dishonesty and putting the whole of the rest of society at risk.
Well, Greg, I take all of those points, and you do seem now to be, to some degree, admitting that the many millions of cases of coronavirus and deaths that we were at least initially potentially anticipating are not going to come about. Having said that, there is a report today by Bloomberg. Let me just read it to you. China's new outbreak shows signs the virus could be changing. Chinese doctors are seeing the coronavirus manifest differently among patients in its new cluster of cases in the Northeast region compared to the original outbreak in Wuhan, suggesting that the pathogen may be changing in unknown ways and complicating efforts to stamp it out. So basically, they're now identifying new cases of the virus, which have mutated somewhat. So although perhaps the deaths that we've seen so far are not as great as they certainly could have been, should we not be now concerned that this mutation is developing?
These all are coronaviruses, be they SARS, MERS, H1N1, or COVID-19. We'll be on to COVID 20, 21, 22, and 30 in the fullness of time, because viruses constantly mutate. Sometimes they die out as a strain. However, this one seems to be continuing. It's believed to be based on a huge reservoir amongst bats, where every so often it leaps species, usually via birds or pigs, and we end up getting it as human beings. It will either be a worse version or a milder version, but COVID-19 as it currently stood has proved to be unpleasant, fatal for some, but putting it in context, we have 325,000 deaths from this disease, which would appear to have started in November last year in Wuhan province, China. And the last serious pandemic mankind had was the Spanish flu, which lasted for 3 years and then suddenly died out for no realistic, explicable reason. And that killed not 325,000, but between 50 and 100 million people. We are getting off lightly, it looks, at the moment.
So a final question then, are you basically saying what America is doing, with bearing in mind that even yesterday they had reported another 1,500 deaths, are you saying what they're doing by easing the lockdown at the pace that they're doing it, certainly in some states, not in all admittedly, is the right thing to do?
I think easing it with baby steps and finding the safest ways of easing it makes a lot of sense. But let's look at America for a second. There have been areas in America where there has been a flat denial and suicidal behavior, with mass demonstrations of armed personnel protesting about the government they elected. That cannot, under any circumstances, be considered the right way to deal with a potential pandemic. I question many of the actions of Trump. I think he set an appalling precedent by taking drugs that have not been tested and have not been approved by the FDA. If you can take those drugs that haven't been approved, there will be people who will be making a defense that they should be allowed to use cocaine and heroin, which also hasn't been approved. And the judicial system will have difficulty gainsaying it when their own president is ignoring his own organization's national rulings regarding drugs. They're doing the right thing by easing up, but in many ways they're doing it the wrong way, in my opinion.
Well, Greg, that's great. We've run out of time. Thank you very much. And what's your prediction? Because probably our next video might either be Saturday or Sunday, just for interest, really. We've got 5 million cases worldwide. Do you think it'll make 6 million by Saturday?
I don't think it'll make 6 million by Saturday, but I think it will inexorably climb to 6 million. We have had 660 more deaths so far today, and it's only 10:43 plus 1 GMT. We haven't got the figures in from the USA, Spain, Brazil, UK, Italy, France, Germany, Turkey, Iran yet. So you can expect that to be a fairly large figure again. We will be, I would have thought, approaching the 500,000 deaths within next week sometime.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to give a forecast based on what's been happening. If we end up doing this on a Sunday evening, unfortunately, I would probably hazard the guess that deaths in the United States will reach the 100,000. In other words, 6,500 more.
I think that's a fairly safe figure.
Than they have at present. And it is a tragedy, to be fair. But as the president has come out and said, and some of his staff, whilst every death is a tragedy, there are other deaths occurring because of the severity of the lockdown. And of course, all sorts of mental health issues emanating as well. So it's a very difficult balance to get right. And it doesn't help when the media actually places it in a very clear black and white situation, i.e., if you let people out, you're not only risking their lives, but you're causing their deaths. But equally, if you don't let them out, others will die too. So not an easy solution. Greg, thank you very much.
The media is very good at criticizing. I can't think of any media worldwide at the moment who are acting responsibly and displaying an ability to support the best efforts of people who, in all fairness, can only work on the advice they're given, and that nobody has any experience in our lifetime or within the last century of dealing with a pandemic.
Indeed. Greg, thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if so, kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell sign so that you are notified of our videos as and when they are published. And also in the description box below, we place links to certain books, articles, and programs which you may find of benefit, and for which we will receive a small commission should you purchase through our link. And this will help support our channel and to enable us to develop it further.